The stadium lights buzzed, casting long, sharp shadows over Liam as he stood alone on the cracked asphalt of the neighborhood court. He kicked a deflated ball against the rusted chain-link fence. It bounced back with a dull thud, hitting his shin. He did not stop. He reset his stance, shifted his weight, and struck the ball again. The soles of his feet pressed hard against the ground. Feeling every jagged pebble through the worn material, he moved with a mechanical precision, ignoring the grit in his eyes and the chill rising from the pavement. He sprinted toward the goal he had spray-painted onto the brick wall, the rough surface scraping his skin as he pivoted. He controlled the ball, turned, and fired it back at the fence. The metal rattled in response. Again. The ball hit the fence. Again. He chased the rebound. The echo of his own movement was the only sound in the dead end of the city. He kept his head down, focused only on the rhythm of his feet against the concrete, driving himself until his lungs burned and the rhythm of the game became the only thing that existed. He accelerated toward the brick wall for one final strike. His right foot planted firmly, but his knee betrayed him. A sharp, white-hot sting shot through his ankle as he buckled. He collapsed onto the asphalt, the impact jarring his teeth. He sat there, clutching his leg, his breath hitching in the cold air. He looked toward the empty street, watching the shadows stretch across the silent houses. No scouts would ever find this corner of the city. The realization settled in, colder than the concrete beneath him. He waited for the throbbing in his joint to dull, his hands gripping the grit-covered surface. He did not look for help. There was none. He forced his weight onto his good leg, gritted his teeth, and pulled himself upright. He tested his footing, winced, and hobbled back to the ball. He ignored the swelling, squared his shoulders, and struck the ball again. The impact sent a jolt of pain up his leg, but he did not stop. He practiced his penalty kicks until the streetlights flickered and died, leaving him in total darkness. 2 years later, the heavy door of the locker room swung open. Liam stepped into a space that smelled of deep heat rub and expensive soap. He hesitated at the threshold. The room was packed with players pulling on high-end equipment, their movements fluid and confident. He scanned the rows of lockers, looking for a space, but every bench was occupied by someone checking their phone or adjusting their shin guards. He moved toward the back, his movements stiff. A teammate brushed past him, eyes fixed elsewhere, not acknowledging his presence. Liam found a narrow gap on the wooden bench and sat down, his hands resting on his knees. He watched the others talk, their laughter bouncing off the tiled walls. He felt the weight of their silence toward him. The coach walked in, his footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. He moved down the line, stopping to slap shoulders and offer brief words of instruction. When he reached Liam, he paused for a fraction of a second, his gaze sweeping over him. The coach pointed toward the far end of the row, then toward the empty space behind the equipment piles. He did not speak. Liam stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked to the designated spot. He sat down and stared at the floor, waiting for the practice to begin. The routine settled into a dull, repetitive rhythm. Before every whistle, Liam was the first one out, hauling plastic crates filled with water bottles to the edge of the pitch. He arranged them in perfect rows, checking every cap. He watched the starters warm up, their laughter drifting toward him, but he never joined the circle. During the drills, he stood by the touchline, holding a clipboard he was never asked to read. He collected loose balls that skidded past the perimeter, his footsteps heavy against the damp turf. He spent hours watching the team move in patterns he had studied his entire life, but he was always outside the lines. Once, during a scrimmage, he stepped forward to offer a suggestion to a midfielder. The coach intercepted him, holding up a palm without looking at him, and pointed back toward the water crates. Liam retreated, his jaw tight. He stood in the rain, his movements mechanical, watching the clock tick down toward the end of another day. He was part of the squad, yet he existed in a different dimension. The team practiced, they celebrated goals, and they walked off the field together. Liam followed behind, carrying the empty crates, his eyes fixed on the grass. The sky opened up, turning the training ground into a slick, gray mess. Liam was at the edge of the pitch, wiping rain from his eyes, when the striker collided with a defender. The sound was sharp, like a branch snapping under weight. Both players went down. The striker did not move. gripping his knee as the team gathered in a tight, frantic circle. The coach pushed through the players, his brow furrowed, then stood up and scanned the sidelines. He locked eyes with Liam. He didn't wave or shout, he simply pointed a finger directly at the field. Liam dropped the water crate. His pulse spiked, drumming against his ribs with a force that made his breath hitch. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the mud staining his knees. He moved toward the white line, his gait uneven, the adrenaline turning his hands cold. The coach stood by the touchline, arms crossed, waiting for him to step inside the perimeter. Liam crossed the threshold, the grass feeling different beneath his feet than it had from the sidelines. He took a deep breath, the cold air stinging his lungs. He was in. He looked at the ball sitting in the mud, then toward the center of the field, waiting for the whistle. The whistle blew, cutting through the rain. A teammate launched a pass toward him, the ball spinning through the air. Liam moved to meet it, his feet heavy. His concentration split between the ball and the shadows of the defenders closing in. He reached out to trap the pass, but his boot hit the surface at an awkward angle. The ball didn't settle. It ricocheted off his instep, gaining speed, and rolled harmlessly across the touchline. A collective groan rose from the small group of onlookers, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the damp air. Liam froze, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the white line where the ball had vanished. He turned back toward the touchline. The coach stood there, his face a mask of cold disappointment. He didn't shout, which made the silence worse. He simply stared, his eyes tracking Liam with a clinical, dismissive detachment. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. He stood on the pitch, exposed and paralyzed. As the rest of the team reset their positions, the rain continued to fall, soaking into his skin, making the weight of the mistake feel physical, like a leaden anchor, dragging him down into the mud. Minutes bled away, each one heavier than the last. Liam moved mechanically, his legs burning with the effort of every sprint. He ignored the burning in his lungs and the dampness of his skin. The score remained locked, a stalemate that felt like a tightening noose. Every time the ball moved, the entire stadium seemed to hold its breath. He watched the referee check his watch. The gesture signaling the end was near. The crowd was no longer groaning. They were tense, expectant, waiting for a single mistake to break the deadlock. Liam kept his distance from the others, his eyes darting across the field, scanning for a gap in the defense. He knew this was the last chance. If he failed again, the season would end in silence. He pushed his hair back, wiping away the stinging sweat, and took a position between two defenders. He didn't look at the bench. He didn't look at the coach. He stared at the midfield, waiting for the ball to be released. The air felt thin, charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The final minute of the season had arrived, and with it, the pressure to prove he belonged on the pitch. A long, arcing pass sailed from the midfield, cutting through the damp evening air. Liam watched the ball spin, its trajectory clear against the floodlights. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. As the ball dropped toward his chest, he took a half step back, cushioning the impact with his midsection. It killed the momentum instantly. The ball landed at his feet, sitting perfectly on the turf. He pivoted on his left heel, a fluid motion that left the trailing defender grasping at empty space. Time seemed to stretch. The stadium noise dropped to a dull, distant thrum. He looked up, his vision narrowing until only the goal remained. The keeper had stepped too far off his line, anticipating a cross rather than a shot. A gap opened in the top right corner of the frame. Liam felt the grass under his cleats, solid and firm. He shifted his weight to his planted foot, drawing his right leg back. His muscles coiled, ready to release the tension that had been building for 2 years. He didn't look at the coach. He didn't look at the crowd. He locked his eyes on the target, his breathing steady, his focus absolute as he prepared to strike. He drove his right foot through the center of the ball. The impact vibrated up his leg, a clean, sharp snap that echoed in his chest. The ball rose, curling away from the keeper's desperate, outstretched hand. Time resumed its normal pace. The ball traced a perfect arc, defying the wind, and tucked firmly into the top corner of the net. The mesh rippled violently. A split second of absolute silence followed. Then the stadium erupted into a roar that shook the very ground. The final whistle pierced the air, sharp and final. Liam did not run. His legs simply gave way, and he fell to his knees as the grass pressed into his skin. Before he could draw a full breath, his teammates hit him. They were a mass of moving weight, pulling him down, shouting into his ears, and burying him in a pile of limbs. He felt the rough turf against his palms and the heavy weight of his teammates pressing him into the ground. It was a suffocating, glorious weight, the physical proof of the goal that had finally settled the score. He pushed his hair out of his eyes, his chest heaving, listening to the thunderous chanting of his name rising from the stands. Liam pushed upward, shedding the weight of his teammates until he stood on his own feet again. The grass felt solid beneath him, stable and real. He wiped the damp mud from his face with the back of his hand, leaving a dark streak against his skin. His breathing slowed, matching the rhythm of the rising noise around him. He turned toward the north stands, his gaze sweeping over the sea of faces until it locked onto a single point. There, in the front row, was his father. The man was leaning over the railing, waving a tattered, faded scarf that caught the stadium lights. Liam felt the tension of the last 2 years dissolve. He didn't look back at the bench or the sidelines. He straightened his posture, pulling his shoulders back, and started to walk. His steps were measured, purposeful, and heavy with intent. The sound of thousands of voices began to synchronize. It was a low rumble that grew into a rhythmic, thunderous chant of his name. He reached the center circle and stood still, letting the noise wash over him. He was no longer the boy on the corner court. He was here. He was exactly where he belonged.